The fluorescent lights of his office hummed, a sterile, detached sound against the sudden silence. Outside, the city thrummed below, oblivious. I sat across from him, the heavy mahogany desk a barrier, feeling the cold air conditioning prickle my skin despite the knot of heat tightening in my chest. His face, a face I had woken up next to for 10 years, was a mask I didn't recognize, set, distant, almost clinical. There was no anger, no sadness, just a flat finality that cut deeper than any shout ever could. My palms felt slick against the smooth wood. My breath hitched, catching in my throat, a tiny, desperate animal trying to escape. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. Life before that moment felt solid, built on a foundation of shared history, shared ambition. We met in grad school, two ambitious kids with fire in our bellies, dreaming of building something. Something meaningful, something that mattered. He was the visionary, the sharp-edged strategist. I was the steady hand, the operational backbone, the one who made the vision real. We started the firm from scratch, late nights fueled by cheap coffee and shared dreams in a cramped rented office that smelled perpetually of old pizza and desperation. We were a team, a unit. Married life folded seamlessly into work life. Our home was an extension of our partnership an extension of our home. We talked business over breakfast, strategy over dinner. It wasn't just a job, it was our life, intertwined, inseparable. I handled everything behind the scenes: finance, HR, client relations, the meticulous work that kept the gears turning. He was the face, the rainmaker, the one shaking hands and closing deals. It worked. We grew. The cramped office became a sleek, multi-story building downtown. The shared dreams became corner offices with skyline views. We were the golden couple, the power duo. People envied us. They saw the success, the effortless partnership. They didn't see the quiet nights in, the shared jokes, the comfortable silence, the easy way we fit together. It felt like we had built an empire, brick by carefully laid brick, together. My role wasn't flashy, but it was essential. I was the anchor, the one who ensured the ship didn't sink while he navigated the storms. I was the COO, the Chief Operating Officer. It was my title, yes, but it felt more like the Chief Everything Officer. I knew every employee's name, every client's quirks, every budget line item. I was the heart and the brain, keeping the body alive and functioning. I believed with every fiber of my being that my place in that company, the company we built, was as permanent as my place in our marriage. I was wrong. The words he used were careful, precise, like a surgeon making an incision. Cold, sterile, designed to minimize mess but maximize impact. "This isn't working anymore," he said, his voice low, devoid of warmth. My stomach dropped, a lead weight hitting the floor. I thought he meant the marriage, the faint cracks that had started to appear recently, the late nights that felt less like work and more like avoidance, the subtle distance that had grown between us like a physical space. But then he gestured towards the organizational chart on his screen, a pristine, impersonal diagram of our shared life's work. "Your role," he clarified, and my heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. "As COO. It's evolved. The company needs a different kind of energy now. More forward-facing. More modern? The word felt like a slap. I had built the entire operational structure that allowed his modern vision to flourish. My breath hitched again. "What are you saying?" I managed to whisper, my voice trembling, alien to my own ears. He leaned back, the expensive leather chair creaking softly. He didn't look at me, not really. His gaze was fixed somewhere over my shoulder, at the skyline perhaps, or at a future he had already decided didn't include me. "I'm saying," he said, his voice gaining a fraction of strength, the confidence of a man delivering bad news he believes is necessary, "that we're making a change. Effective immediately. The word echoed in the silent room, hanging in the air like smoke. Effective immediately. 10 years, reduced to 2 words. He then mentioned a severance package, benefits, standard procedure. Standard procedure for laying off an employee, not dismantling a life, not dissolving a partnership, both personal and professional, that had been the bedrock of my existence. My mind reeled. Who? Who could possibly step into that role? Who knew the inner workings, the history, the delicate balance I maintained? Who? And then he said her name. We're bringing in someone new. Sarah Jenkins, Sarah Jenkins. The name hit me with the force of a physical blow. Sarah Jenkins. The young, ambitious, undeniably beautiful consultant he'd been working very closely with on the expansion project for the last 6 months. The one he suddenly needed to meet for dinner, to discuss strategy multiple nights a week. The one who laughed a little too loudly at his jokes during company events. The one whose name, in hushed whispers I had tried to ignore, had started to circulate through the office like a silent virus. My vision blurred. My ears roared. Sarah Jenkins. My husband was firing me and giving my job to his mistress. The room tilted. The sterile light felt blinding. The clinical mask on his face cracked for a split second, revealing something that might have been a flicker of regret, or maybe just impatience. She's perfect for the direction the company is heading, he added, as if adding insult to catastrophic injury could somehow justify it. Perfect. For the direction we were heading, he meant. The direction he was heading with her. My voice found its strength then, rising from the wreckage of my composure, sharp and raw. You're not just firing me, I said, the words laced with a bitterness that tasted like ash. You're replacing me. With her, he didn't deny it. He didn't flinch. He just looked away again, towards that horizon he was chasing. It's a business decision, he stated, the ultimate shield for the utterly indefensible. A business decision. My decade of blood, sweat, and tears. My emotional investment, my financial stake, my identity woven into the fabric of the company. Our marriage, reduced to a line item on a balance sheet he was balancing with another woman. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing down on me, crushing the air from my lungs. I stood up, my legs shaky, the mahogany desk feeling like a vast ocean between us now. There was nothing left to say. The man I had built a life with, the man who knew my deepest fears and biggest dreams, had just dismantled me, piece by piece, in his air-conditioned office. And he called it a business decision. Walking out of that office, out of the building, felt like an out-of-body experience. The city outside, the one that had felt like a shared playground, now felt hostile and indifferent. Each step I took away from the gleaming glass tower felt like a step further into a strange, desolate land. Home wasn't home anymore. It was his house, filled with the ghost of our life, soon to be occupied by her. My phone buzzed with notifications, work emails I was no longer authorized to receive, calendar reminders for meetings I wouldn't attend. Each notification was a tiny, brutal reminder of the life that had been surgically removed from me. The first few days were a blur of shock and disbelief. I moved into a small, sterile apartment furnished with temporary furniture, a place that felt less like a home and more like a waiting room for a future I couldn't envision. The silence there was deafening, a stark contrast to the constant hum of activity my life used to be. Sleep offered little respite, haunted by replays of that conversation, of his face, of the sound of Sarah Jenkins's name leaving his lips. The betrayal was a constant, gnawing ache, but the humiliation was a burning, visible brand. Everyone knew, or they would soon. Fired by my husband, replaced by his mistress. It was a tabloid headline waiting to happen, a whispered office rumor that would follow me wherever I went. My identity, so intertwined with the firm, with us, felt erased. Who was I without that? Without him? Without the life we built? I tried to project an air of composure to the few friends I spoke to, offering vague explanations about restructuring and differing visions, but the truth was a screaming siren in my head. The raw shame made it hard to breathe, made it hard to face anyone. I was the wronged wife, yes, but I was also the discarded COO, the one who apparently wasn't modern enough, not perfect enough for the future. It felt like a total rejection of everything I was, professionally and personally. I felt adrift, anchorless, Watching the ship, I helped build sail away with a new captain and a new first mate. Attempts to look for other jobs felt futile. My network was largely within the industry, tied to the firm he now controlled. How could I explain this gap on my resume? How could I answer the inevitable questions without sounding bitter or unstable? Each job board I scrolled through felt like entering a world that had moved on without me. The skills I had honed, the knowledge I possessed, felt suddenly obsolete, tainted by the circumstances of my departure. I was adrift in a sea of uncertainty, the shores of my old life receding with alarming speed. The quiet desperation of those first few weeks settled in, a heavy cloak of despair. The phone calls from him were infrequent, transactional. Discussions about finances, about separating our lives. Each call was a fresh cut, a reminder of the chasm that had opened between us. He spoke with that same detached politeness, discussing assets and legalities as if we were strangers negotiating a complex business deal. In a way, we were. The emotional currency had been spent, leaving only cold, hard numbers. I learned through whispers from former colleagues, brave souls who risked his displeasure, that Sarah Jenkins had settled into my office, my chair, my role with unnerving ease. She was making changes, they said, shaking things up. Her name was everywhere. It felt like she was systematically dismantling the structures I had so carefully built, not just taking my job, but erasing my legacy. The report stung, fueling the burning humiliation. It wasn't enough that she had taken my husband and my job. She was now taking my professional identity, brick by brick. My financial situation became precarious. The severance was finite, and the job market felt like a desert. Lawyers' fees for the divorce proceedings added another layer of stress. I watched my savings dwindle, a terrifying countdown to potential ruin. The fear was a constant companion, whispering doubts in my ear, magnifying the sense of failure. What if I couldn't find another job? What if I lost everything? The comfortable cushion of our shared success was gone, leaving me exposed and vulnerable. The divorce negotiations were brutal. He was represented by a shark, a lawyer who seemed intent on minimizing his financial exposure at my expense. Arguments over shared assets, over the value of the firm we built, felt surreal and sickening. His lawyer painted a picture of me as simply an employee, not a partner, not a co-founder in spirit. It was a deliberate, cruel erasure of my contributions, designed to diminish my claim. Every legal document felt like a personal attack, a validation of his narrative that I was expendable. I felt increasingly isolated. Some friends took his side, drawn by loyalty or perhaps the magnetic pull of his continued success. Others awkwardly offered platitudes, unsure how to navigate the toxic fallout. The world felt smaller, colder. I spent hours alone in the sterile apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying conversations, dissecting where it had all gone wrong. The grief for the lost marriage mingled with the fury over the professional betrayal, a potent, toxic cocktail that left me feeling hollowed out and raw. The image of them, together in my office, living my life, became a recurring nightmare, a constant reminder of the life I had lost and the people who had taken it from me. The helplessness was the most debilitating feeling of all. I was a spectator in my own life's demolition, unable to stop the wrecking ball. The careful, meticulous planner in me, the one who always had a solution, was paralyzed. There were no obvious avenues for recourse. He was the CEO, the majority shareholder. He had the power, the control. He had won, and I had lost everything that mattered. The despair deepened into a heavy, suffocating blanket. I felt trapped at the bottom of a deep well, the walls smooth and impossible to climb, the sky a distant, indifferent circle of light. All I could do was sit there, in the darkness, and feel the cold truth of my defeat. One rainy afternoon, staring out the window at the relentless gray sky, a memory surfaced. A conversation years ago with my grandfather. He was a quiet, shrewd man, the architect of our family's considerable, but very private, wealth. We weren't the kind of family that flaunted money. It was there, a silent, steady presence, managed through trusts and investments, providing a safety net that was rarely discussed but always understood to be vast and deep. My grandfather had mentioned a specific trust, one set up years ago, not just for inheritance, but with a broader mandate. A mandate that included strategic investments, opportunities, even acquisitions. He talked about it in abstract terms then, as a tool, a lever that could be used not just for growth, but for influence. Control. At the time, it felt like distant, complex financial jargon. Now, sitting in the sterile silence of the temporary apartment, the words resonated with a sudden, startling clarity. Acquisitions. The word pulsed in my mind. An acquisition wasn't just buying a company, it was buying control. It was changing the ownership, changing the power structure. It was, in essence, taking the keys. Could my family's trust acquire his firm? The thought was audacious, almost laughably impossible at first glance. But the more I thought about it, the less impossible it seemed. The firm, while successful, wasn't a multinational conglomerate. It was a private company, built on our shared efforts, but still within a certain scale. The trust, I knew, had assets that dwarfed the firm's valuation. The legal complexity would be immense, the process lengthy and undoubtedly fraught. But the idea, once planted, began to take root, pushing aside the suffocating despair like a determined weed through concrete. It wasn't just about getting my job back. It wasn't just about money. It was about something far more fundamental. Restoring balance, reclaiming what was stolen, proving that I wasn't disposable. It was about turning the tables not just slightly but completely, irrevocably. The image of his face, that cold, clinical mask, flashed in my mind. And then, the image of Sarah Jenkins, sitting at my desk, in my chair, wearing a smug smile. The idea of blindsiding them, of using the very foundation of my background, the quiet, underestimated strength of my family's legacy, to dismantle the empire they thought they had taken from me, it was intoxicating. It shifted something deep within me. The helpless victim felt a surge of ice-cold determination. The strategic planner, long dormant under layers of grief and humiliation, began to stir. This wasn't just revenge, it was a strategic takeover. A hostile acquisition of my own life back. The possibility, however distant, felt like the first breath of fresh air I had taken in months. It was a daring plan, a high-stakes gamble that would require navigating complex legal and financial landscapes, operating in absolute secrecy, and leveraging relationships I hadn't relied on before. It felt overwhelming, yes, but for the first time since that day in his office, I felt a flicker of purpose. A path forward. A way to fight back, not from a position of weakness, but from a position of quiet, overwhelming strength they never saw coming. The thought solidified from a desperate fantasy into a concrete, albeit terrifying, possibility. It was time to stop being the victim. It was time to become the strategist again. The decision solidified into a cold, hard resolve. This wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about strategy, about leverage, about power. I reached out to the trustees, distant relatives who managed the family's vast holdings with quiet efficiency. I laid out the situation, stripped bare of personal drama, the firm's structure, its valuation, the potential for acquisition as a sound, albeit unconventional, investment opportunity. I didn't dwell on the betrayal, the mistress, the humiliation. I focused on the numbers, the market position, the potential for growth under new, competent leadership. My leadership. They listened, their questions sharp and analytical. They saw the logic, the potential return. And they saw something else, the inherent unfairness of the situation, perhaps, or maybe just the steely determination in my voice that had replaced the earlier despair. Once the concept was approved, the wheels began to turn. Quietly, discreetly. This wasn't a public hostile takeover announcement. It was a silent creep, an unseen force moving into position. The legal team from the trust was formidable, their approach meticulous and low-key. They began acquiring shares from smaller stakeholders, navigating complex agreements, all under layers of corporate anonymity. I was involved in the strategy, providing insights into the firm's internal structure, its vulnerabilities, its true value beyond the balance sheets. My decade of building the operational core became the blueprint for dismantling his control. It felt surreal, sitting in hushed meetings with high-powered lawyers and financial analysts, discussing the acquisition of the company that had been my life. Discussing the financial calculations that would determine the price of my freedom, the cost of their comeuppance. The process was agonizingly slow, a waiting game that stretched over months. Each day that passed felt like a tightrope walk. What if they found out? What if he caught wind of it? The secrecy was paramount. I maintained a low profile, continued the slow, painful process of divorce negotiations, acting the part of the wronged, struggling ex-wife. He remained oblivious, wrapped up in his new life, his new partner, his seemingly unchallenged control of the firm. Sarah Jenkins, I heard, was thriving, making bold moves, putting her stamp on things. The reports still stung, but they also fueled my resolve. Every change she made, every decision she implemented, was a piece of information I could feed into the acquisition strategy. I knew her weaknesses, her lack of deep institutional knowledge, her focus on the superficial. This wasn't just business, it was war. And I had the ultimate weapon, hidden in plain sight, my family's quiet, immense power, now wielded with purpose. The internal monologue was relentless. Doubt warred with determination. Fear with icy anticipation. There were days the weight of it felt unbearable, the pressure of holding this secret, of orchestrating this seismic shift while maintaining a facade of vulnerability. But the memory of that day in his office, of his cold eyes and her name on his lips, was a constant, potent fuel. This wasn't just about justice. It was about reclaiming my narrative, my power, my worth. It was about proving that I was not easily discarded, that the woman he fired and replaced was not a casualty, but a force he had profoundly underestimated. The final stages of the acquisition were a blur of legal filings and financial transfers, a complex dance culminating in a single, critical moment. The moment the necessary percentage of shares was secured. The moment the control shifted, irrevocably. The moment the trap was sprung. The morning it happened was unusually quiet. The kind of quiet that precedes a storm. I was dressed, sitting by the window, watching the city wake up, my heart a frantic drumbeat in my chest. The legal team had confirmed everything was in place. The necessary filings had been made. The announcement to the company was scheduled for 9 a.m. Just minutes away. I imagined the scene unfolding in the conference room on the top floor, the one with a panoramic view, the room where we had celebrated so many victories, where we had planned so many futures. He would be there, probably with Sarah Jenkins by his side, presiding over some mundane meeting. And then the email would land. Or the external announcement would break. The message would spread like wildfire. The firm, his firm, the firm we built was under new ownership. Acquired. The minutes ticked by like hours. My hands were clasped so tightly my knuckles were white. The air felt thin, charged with anticipation. And then my phone rang. It was a number I recognized, a senior partner at the firm, someone I had mentored, someone who had remained quietly loyal. His voice was shaking.
Did you
know? He stammered, barely coherent. The email. The trust. We've been acquired. Effective immediately. They're saying your family trust. Is that possible? A small, cold smile touched my lips. It's possible, I said, my voice steady, calmer than I expected. It's real. The line went silent for a moment, the weight of the news sinking in. He's in the conference room, my contact whispered, the chaos in the background audible now, raised voices, gasps. Sarah's with him. They look like they've seen a ghost, he described the scene. The initial disbelief, the frantic checks of emails and news feeds, the dawning horror on their faces as the reality hit. He, the master strategist, the man who always had control, watching his empire crumble in an instant, taken by a force he never anticipated. Her, the ambitious usurper, realizing the ground beneath her feet, had just disappeared. The plot twist wasn't just the acquisition, it was the identity of the acquirer. The wronged wife, The discarded COO, the woman they thought they had vanquished, had returned not to beg for her job back, but to buy the entire chessboard. Sarah Jenkins resigned that same afternoon. She didn't wait to be fired. She didn't try to negotiate a new role. She simply packed her things and left, a hasty, ignominious retreat. Her power, her position, was entirely contingent on his. With him undermined, exposed, her reign was over before it truly began. She had taken my job, yes, but she had lost everything by hitching her wagon to a man whose foundation was built on sand, sand that my family's trust had just washed away in a single, decisive tide. Her resignation was a quiet victory within the larger triumph, a satisfying punctuation mark on the end of that particular chapter. He, I heard, remained stuck. His ownership diluted, his authority challenged, the company he once commanded now under my family's control, effectively my control. The man who fired me and replaced me with his mistress was now an employee, his future dependent, in part on my decisions. The irony wasn't lost on me. It was a vindication so complete, so total. It felt almost surreal. The silence in my sterile apartment didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full. Full of a quiet power, a profound sense of having reclaimed not just a company, but my own destiny. The dust settles slowly. The legal complexities continue. The integration of the firm into the trust's portfolio is ongoing, a symphony of accountants and lawyers. But the core truth remains. Control has shifted. The firm is no longer his alone, and his power within it has been irrevocably diminished. Sarah Jenkins is gone. Her name is no longer whispered in the halls, no longer appears on internal memos. She vanished as quickly as she appeared, a temporary disruption swept away by a force she couldn't comprehend. My interactions with him are minimal now, handled through intermediaries or brief, strained conversations that skirt the edges of the past. He is a man adrift in his own world, stripped of the control he once wielded, forced to navigate a new reality where the power dynamic has flipped entirely. There's no gloating, no grand pronouncements from my side. The victory is internal, quiet. It's in the knowledge that I wasn't defeated, that the strength I thought I'd lost was simply dormant, waiting for the right moment, the right tool. The company itself faces changes, new leadership, a new direction. My role in it is evolving. Not as COO, not yet, perhaps never in the same capacity. But I am involved, consulted, my knowledge and expertise now valued again, albeit through a different lens. The emotional scars remain. The betrayal by a husband, a partner of 10 years, doesn't heal overnight. The cost of this victory was high, a marriage, a shared history, irrevocably broken. The sweet taste of vindication is often mixed with the lingering bitterness of what was lost. But beneath the complex layers of emotion, there is a bedrock of quiet satisfaction. I took a situation designed to break me, to leave me powerless and humiliated, and I turned it into a strategic triumph. I used the very foundation of my background, the quiet strength I never flaunted, to dismantle the structure built on his deception. I proved that being underestimated can be the most powerful advantage of all. The journey from that cold office, from the sting of his words and the shame of her name, to this quiet place of reclaimed power has been long and arduous. But I made it. And I did it on my own terms, by remembering who I was and what I was capable of. The sterile apartment no longer feels temporary. It feels like a space of my own, a starting point. The future isn't certain, but for the first time in a long time, it feels like it's mine to build again. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.